At a Velvet Rope restaurant for elite blind dates, every table bowed to wealth until CEO Evelyn Sterling arrived. 32. Breathtaking, famously impossible to impress, she surveyed a row of polished heirs and venture capital princes, then walked past them all. She stopped before Liam Carter, a quiet man in a security uniform by the door. Snickers rippled, phones lifted, headlines wrote themselves. A CEO choosing a lowly guard? No one there knew her intuition had just lit the fuse for a truth about identity that would detonate. The Orchard and Brass restaurant existed in that rarefied space where architecture became theater. Its glass dome ceiling caught the Friday evening rain in delicate threads of light, transforming water into liquid diamonds that danced above the diners. The establishment had earned its reputation not through Michelin stars, but through something far more valuable in Manhattan's social ecosystem: discretion paired with visibility. Tonight, their exclusive blind date section hummed with the particular energy of orchestrated romance among the ultra-wealthy. Evelyn Sterling entered at 8:17, precisely 3 minutes late, a calculated delay that ensured maximum attention without seeming desperate. Her blonde hair fell in controlled waves past her shoulders, each strand catching the ambient light as if trained to do so. The charcoal Armani suit she wore had been tailored to military precision, projecting authority while maintaining an unmistakable femininity. At 32, she commanded Sterling Enterprises, with the same cool efficiency that had tripled its market value in 4 years. Yet tonight, something flickered behind those ice-blue eyes, a weariness that makeup couldn't quite conceal. Across the room, positioned strategically by the service entrance, stood Liam Carter, 6 feet 3 inches of contained energy in a security uniform that seemed somehow both too small and perfectly fitted for his frame. His skin carried the kind of tan that spoke of outdoor work rather than resort vacations, and his dark eyes moved across the room in patterns that suggested muscle memory rather than conscious thought. At 34, he possessed the stillness of someone who had learned that motion without purpose was merely noise. The Hamilton khaki field watch on his wrist, a limited edition that few would recognize, counted seconds he seemed uninterested in spending. Henry Dalton occupied the prime table, his presence announced by the careful arrangement of his 38 years into a package of inherited confidence. His venture capital firm had made him wealthy, but his family name had made him untouchable, or so he believed. The Patek Philippe on his wrist caught light deliberately as he gestured to his companion, each movement calculated for the invisible audience he assumed was always watching. He specialized in the kind of predatory investment that stripped companies of their souls before selling the husks for profit. Serena Whitmore, Sterling Enterprises board chair at 50, sat 3 tables away, her presence both protective and evaluative. She admired Evelyn's discipline, but viewed tonight's exercise as an unnecessary risk to carefully maintained corporate imagery. Her phone vibrated with market updates she ignored, choosing instead to observe her protégé navigate this minefield of eligible bachelors and hidden agendas. Amanda Reyes, 29 and sharp as winter wind, positioned herself at the bar where she could monitor both traditional media representatives and the more dangerous breed of social media influencers. As Sterling's PR director, she possessed an almost supernatural ability to sense reputational threats before they materialized. Her fingers traced the rim of her untouched martini glass as she cataloged exits, angles, and potential crisis points. Oliver Grant, 41 years of journalism distilled into cynical curiosity, nursed his whiskey at a corner table. His presence here wasn't coincidence. Nothing in Oliver's life ever was. The financial press badge in his pocket granted him access to corporate earnings calls, but his real talent lay in transforming personal moments into public spectacles. His latest article on tech dynasties had garnered 2 million views. Tonight promised fresh material. The evening's stated purpose was elegant in its simplicity, a curated mixer for what the invitation had called individuals of exceptional accomplishment seeking meaningful connection. In practice, it functioned as a marketplace where pedigree met ambition, where merger negotiations masqueraded as flirtation, where every smile carried a calculated return on investment. The men present had submitted financial statements, along with their applications. The women had provided corporate bios that read like investor prospectuses. Everyone understood the game's rules, or thought they did. Evelyn moved through the space with practiced grace, her expression neutral as the event coordinator gestured toward the lineup of approved candidates. Each man stood a careful distance apart, close enough for comparison, but far enough to maintain individual dignity. Their faces carried the same expression, confident availability tinged with just enough vulnerability to seem human. She had reviewed their profiles earlier: the Harvard MBA with the sustainable energy startup, the diplomatic corps scion with political ambitions, the art dealer whose family gallery had shaped cultural tastes for 3 generations. Each represented a safe choice, a predictable alliance, a story that would write itself in the society pages. Her heels clicked against Italian marble as she approached them, each step measured and deliberate. George Pierce straightened his shoulders, his elevator pitch ready. Nathan Lowell adjusted his Yale-class ring, ensuring it caught the light. William Brooks touched the Mont Blanc in his breast pocket, a gesture of unconscious wealth. They all waited for her to choose, to validate their careful preparations, to begin the dance they had rehearsed since prep school. She walked past them all. The room's carefully maintained hum fractured into confused silence. Evelyn continued forward, drawn by something indefinable, until she stood before the man in the security uniform. Up close, she could see the subtle wear patterns on his collar that suggested repeated adjustment, the way his stance distributed weight evenly, despite standing for hours, the small scar above his left eyebrow that spoke of stories untold. His eyes met hers without the usual calculations she saw in others, no mental math of her net worth, no strategic positioning for advantage, just acknowledgement of her presence. "You've been standing all evening," she said, her voice carrying just far enough to be public, without being theatrical. "That must be exhausting." Liam's response came after a pause that felt deliberate rather than uncertain. "I can see all the exits from here. Can you say the same about yours?" The question landed with unexpected weight. Around them, the room erupted in barely concealed whispers. Henry Dalton's laugh cut through the noise, sharp and dismissive. "Did she just is this performance art?" His companion, a derivatives trader named Marcus, shook his head in theatrical disbelief. 500 million in annual revenue, and she picks the help. There's a headline. Oliver Grant's fingers flew across his phone screen, already composing the tweet that would launch 1,000 think pieces. Breaking: Sterling Enterprises CEO chooses security guard at elite Manhattan mixer. Late-stage capitalism, or love-crossing class lines, developing? Evelyn gestured to an empty table, not the premium location reserved for her, but a quiet corner where the orchestral music softened to background texture. Liam hesitated, his training warring with the situation's absurdity, before following her lead. The way he pulled out her chair suggested familiarity with the gesture, but not recent practice. His hands, she noticed, bore the calluses of someone who worked with more than keyboards and contracts. "You don't seem surprised," she observed, as he settled across from her, his positioning automatically allowing him to maintain sightlines to both entrances and the service corridor. "People surprise themselves more than they surprise others," he replied. "You walked in here looking for something you weren't going to find in that lineup. And you could tell that from across the room?" "I could tell that from how you held your shoulders, braced for disappointment." He paused, considering his words. The same way someone stands when they're about to walk through a door they know leads nowhere but have to check anyway. The waiter approached with visible uncertainty, his training in hierarchical service suddenly irrelevant. Evelyn ordered without consulting the menu she had memorized it weeks ago, a habit from countless business dinners where showing uncertainty about anything invited challenge. Liam requested water, nothing else, his comfort with simplicity either refreshing or concerning, depending on one's perspective. Henry materialized beside their table before the drinks arrived, his presence preceded by cologne that cost more than most monthly salaries. "Evelyn, darling," he began, the endearment wielded like a scalpel. "I have to admire the commitment to this bit. Very avant-garde. Though I wonder what your board will think when they see tomorrow's headlines. Sterling Enterprises CEO's blue-collar fantasy has such a ring to it." Liam didn't rise to the bait, didn't even shift his posture. Instead, he nodded toward a security camera in the corner, its red light barely visible. "Interesting placement for that camera. Catches the room but creates a blind spot right behind the pillar. Someone could stand there for 20 minutes without being recorded. Makes you wonder what conversations happen in shadows when everyone's watching the spotlight." Henry's smile faltered minutely. The camera's blind spot was where he had conducted a particularly sensitive conversation about insider information just an hour ago. The observation was too precise, too knowing to be accidental. "I don't believe we've been introduced," Henry said, his tone sharpening. "Henry Dalton. I run Dalton Ventures. And you are?" "Working," Liam replied simply. "If you'll excuse us." The dismissal was polite, but final. Henry retreated, but not before throwing a glance at Oliver Grant that clearly said, "Document everything." Evelyn studied the man across from her with renewed interest. That wasn't a guess about the camera. "Patterns," Liam said, his fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of his water glass. "You learn to see them, where people feel safe talking, where they think they're invisible. Most security is theater. Real protection means understanding what people do when they think no one's looking." "Speaking from experience?" "Speaking from observation." He met her gaze directly. "The same way I can tell you've been burned before. Someone got close enough to matter, then used that proximity for leverage." Now you conduct relationship meetings like hostile takeover negotiations. The accuracy stung. Leo Archer's betrayal selling their pillow talk to competitors, using intimacy as corporate espionage had carved scar tissue around her capacity for trust. She had learned to weaponize loneliness, rather than risk another breach. Bold assumptions for someone who doesn't know me, she said, though her tone lacked real defensiveness. Fair, but you chose to sit with someone explicitly outside your world. That's not random. That's someone looking for a variable they can't predict or control. He paused, then added with subtle humor. Plus, your assistant has been photographing us from 3 different angles for the past 5 minutes. That's not standard protocol for a normal date. Evelyn glanced toward Amanda, who had indeed been documenting the evening with strategic discretion. She's protecting the narrative. Or trying to control it. There's a difference. Their conversation was interrupted by Evelyn's phone buzzing insistently. Serena's name flashed on the screen, followed immediately by Amanda's. The digital storm was beginning. She could imagine the messages without reading them. Stock price fluctuations, board concerns, strategies for damage control, the machinery of corporate reputation management grinding into motion. I should handle this, she said, though she made no move to answer. Should and want rarely align, Liam observed. Though I imagine in your position, the distinction becomes academic. She stood, and he rose with her, not the practiced courtesy of the candidates she had passed earlier, but an unconscious synchronization. As they moved toward the terrace doors, she noticed how he automatically positioned himself between her and the room's growing attention, creating a buffer without making it obvious. It was protection without performance, competence without display. The terrace was slick with rain, the city lights below fractured into impressionist smears of color. The temperature had dropped enough to make her jacket insufficient, but the cold felt clean after the restaurant's orchestrated warmth. They stood at the railing, the silence between them more comfortable than any conversation inside. I destroyed someone once, Liam said unexpectedly, his voice low enough that she had to lean closer to hear. Not physically, systematically. I had built something, a way of seeing threats before they materialized, of predicting danger through pattern recognition. I was good at it. Too good. I saw enemies in shadows that turned out to be refugees from violence. My system flagged a community center as a threat nexus. 3 families were detained for 2 years before anyone admitted the error. They lost everything because I was so focused on protecting against threats that I forgot to protect people from protection itself. The confession hung between them, raw and unvarnished. Evelyn recognized the weight of carried guilt, the way it shaped posture and carved lines around eyes. So you became a security guard, she said. Penance? Perspective. When you stand at doors instead of designing them, you see who really needs protection and who just wants to feel important. He pulled something from his pocket, a small microfiber cloth that he used to wipe the rain from the railing before she could lean against it. The gesture was small, practical, but carried unexpected intimacy. I learned that real security isn't about keeping people out. It's about understanding why they want in. His hand trembled slightly as he returned the cloth to his pocket. It was the first crack in his composure, a glimpse of the person beneath the practiced calm. Evelyn found herself moving closer, drawn by the gravity of shared damage. Inside, the spectacle of their pairing had evolved from curiosity to crisis. Oliver's initial tweet had been reshared 4,000 times in 12 minutes. The headline had mutated through digital telephone. Sterling heiress slums for love became CEO's guard dog romance, became billion-dollar blindside. The memes were already generating Evelyn's corporate headshot, photoshopped next to a security company logo, her net worth compared to minimum wage calculations, jokes about protection taking on new meaning. Amanda appeared on the terrace, her phone clutched like a weapon. We have a situation. Oliver's piece just went live on Business Insider. Inside the blind date circus, Sterling picks the guard. He's comparing it to Marie Antoinette playing peasant. The stock dropped 2% in after-hours trading. Serena's voice carried through Amanda's speakerphone. Evelyn, I need you to understand the optics here. We're 3 weeks from closing the Larissa Capital deal. They're already skittish about leadership stability. This reads as either a breakdown or a publicity stunt, neither of which inspires confidence. What do you want me to do? Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the turbulence. Release a statement saying it was a mistake? Claim temporary insanity? I want you to be strategic, Serena replied. Either commit to the narrative or kill it. But do it fast, before this spirals beyond recovery. Evelyn looked at Liam, who had stepped back to give her space, but remained within earshot. His expression was unreadable, but she caught him checking his own phone, a basic model that seemed incongruous with the Hamilton watch. A message flashed briefly. Phase 2 ready. He deleted it without reading. the motion automatic and slightly troubling. I'm not releasing any statement tonight, Evelyn decided. Let them speculate. Amanda's eyes widened. Evelyn, that's my decision. If the board wants to panic over dinner arrangements, that says more about their priorities than mine. She ended the call, cutting off protests from both women. The rain had intensified, driving them back inside, where the dinner crowd had swelled with latecomers drawn by social media alerts. The atmosphere had shifted from exclusive mixer to spectator sport. Every eye tracked their movement, every phone documented their return. Henry raised his glass in mock salute as they passed. To love in unexpected places, he announced, his voice carrying across the room. Though I wonder what kind of prenup covers this particular wealth gap. Does security guard insurance cover CEOs who lose their minds? The laughter was nervous but real. Someone had already started a betting pool on how long the stunt would last. The Harvard MBA suggested 3 days. The art dealer gave it a week. Henry put $1,000 on until the market opens Monday. What happened next shifted the evening's trajectory from spectacle to crisis. The lights flickered, not the gentle dimming of mood adjustment, but the sharp stuttering of electrical failure. Emergency exits automatically locked, their magnetic seals engaging with audible clicks. The fire suppression system gave a warning chirp, suggesting activation without cause. Panic rippled through the room as phones lost signal simultaneously, cutting their lifeline to the outside world. Liam moved before anyone else fully registered the threat. His voice cut through the growing chaos with military precision. Everyone remain calm. This is a system malfunction, not an emergency. Kitchen staff, prop open the service entrance manually. Bartender, you have a landline behind the register. Call building maintenance, not emergency services. He was already at the main electrical panel, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Someone get me a number 14 hex key from the kitchen toolkit, he called out. Then, to a frightened hostess, count heads, make sure everyone's accounted for. You, he pointed to one of the candidates Evelyn had passed over, check the terrace doors, make sure they're not sealed. Within 4 minutes, he had bypassed the magnetic locks manually, restored partial lighting through the backup circuit, and established communication with building security through protocols no standard guard would know. His movements were economical, decisive, and betrayed training far beyond crowd control. Wilfred Hart, a silver-haired gentleman who had been nursing brandy in the corner, watched with recognition dawning in his weathered features. The former military intelligence officer had seen this kind of competence before, in places where mistakes meant casualties rather than inconvenience. That's not how a security guard handles system failure, he murmured to his companion. That's how someone who designs systems handles their failure. The crisis resolved, Liam returned to his position by the door, as if nothing had happened, but the room's dynamic had shifted. The laughter died. Phones captured his actions from multiple angles. Amanda was already on damage control, but her expression had changed from crisis management to curiosity. I need some air, Evelyn announced, though the terrace had proved inhospitable. She moved toward the exit, and Liam followed not obviously, but with the natural flow of someone whose job involved monitoring departures. They ended up in the building's loading dock, an unglamorous space that smelled of garbage and rainwater but offered privacy from the digital mob inside. Want to tell me who you really are? She asked directly. Someone who used to be someone else, he replied. That enough? Not nearly. He pulled out a USB drive from his pocket, not the kind sold at office stores, but a military-grade encrypted device. This contains something I designed. Something that could change how cities protect their citizens or how they surveil them, depending on who controls it. I came here tonight to test human variables, how people act in spaces they think are secure, how security theater affects behavior. I didn't expect, he gestured vaguely toward the restaurant. Me. Anyone. I wasn't looking for connection. I was collecting data. Evelyn took the drive, its weight surprising for its size. And now? Now I'm wondering if the most dangerous blind spot in my system was assuming I could observe without being observed, without being affected. She studied him in the loading dock's harsh fluorescent light. Without the restaurant's calculated ambiance, she could see him more clearly, the precision in his stance that spoke of military training, the slight indentation on his right temple, suggesting extended use of communications equipment, the way his eyes continuously processed environmental data, even during emotional conversation. You're not a guard, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm exactly what I appear to be, he countered. Someone watching doors. The question is whether you want to know which doors and why. Before she could respond, her phone exploded with notifications. The loading dock's position outside the building's signal dampening meant everything hit at once. 47 messages from Serena. 63 from Amanda. 312 notifications from various platforms where her name was trending. But the one that stopped her cold was from Oliver Grant. Exclusive photos. Sterling's guard takes mysterious payment in alley. What is Liam Carter hiding? The attached images showed Liam receiving what appeared to be a cash-stuffed envelope from a hooded figure, actually the USB exchange from earlier, shot at an angle that obscured the device's true nature. The narrative was already writing itself. CEO bamboozled by con artist, security guard on the take, corporate leadership compromised by personal weakness. They moved fast, Liam observed, his tone suggesting admiration for the tactical execution rather than concern for the implications. This will destroy everything, Evelyn said, though her voice carried exhaustion rather than panic. The Larissa deal, the board's confidence, 5 years of building credibility gone because I chose to have dinner with the wrong person. Or the right person at the wrong time. He took the USB back, connecting it to his phone with practiced motion. Want to see what's actually on here before you decide if I'm worth the crisis? The screen illuminated with technical specifications that even Evelyn's MIT background could barely parse. But the executive summary was clear enough. Carter Sentinel, a predictive security system that used behavioral analysis and environmental data to prevent threats before they manifested. Not through surveillance, but through understanding, reading the patterns that preceded violence, identifying vulnerability before exploitation, protecting without oppressing. This is revolutionary, she breathed. Who else knows about this? The Department of Defense knows about version 1.0. They deployed it in 3 cities before I pulled the plug. Too much potential for abuse without proper oversight. Version 3.2, what you're looking at has built-in privacy protection, civilian oversight requirements, and what I call a kill switch. Any deployment can be terminated instantly if it violates predetermined ethical parameters. And you've been testing it here? Tonight? For 6 months, in various locations. Always in uniform, always visible but invisible. Security guards see everything because no one sees them. I needed to understand the human element before I could protect it. The revelation reframed everything. This wasn't a CEO slumming with the help. This was 2 people whose relationship to power had driven them to opposite extremes. One, embracing visibility, the other choosing invisibility, both trying to solve the same problem of human trust from different angles. A town car pulled into the loading dock, Serena Whitmore emerging before it fully stopped. Her expression could have frozen hellfire. Evelyn, car, now. Serena, now. We'll discuss your friend later. Preferably after legal reviews his background and we understand what kind of exposure we're facing. Amanda appeared from another vehicle, tablet in hand. Oliver's got another piece dropping in 20 minutes. Something about Carter's military history. We need to get ahead of this. Evelyn looked between her corporate guardians and the man who had chosen to guard others. The choice felt larger than the moment, representing something about the life she had built versus the one she might want. I'm going back inside, she announced. With him, and we're going to finish dinner. Evelyn, that's corporate suicide. No, Serena. Hiding is corporate suicide. Running from perception is suicide. I built Sterling Enterprises by trusting my instincts when everyone said I was too young, too female, too idealistic. I'm not stopping now, because the internet doesn't understand my dinner choices. She turned to Liam. Unless you'd rather leave. This is about to get much worse before it gets better. His answer came in action rather than words. He offered his arm, not the calculated gesture of her usual escorts, but the simple support of someone who understood that sometimes standing required assistance. They walked back through the loading dock, through the kitchen where staff pretended not to stare, into the dining room where their reappearance triggered an avalanche of phone flashes. Henry Dalton stood, his chair scraping deliberately against marble. Ladies and gentlemen, the return of Beauty and the Beast, though which is which remains open to interpretation. Sit down, Henry, Evelyn said quietly. Your Ponzi scheme is showing. The accusation landed like a grenade. Henry's venture fund had indeed been recycling investor money to hide losses, a fact known only to forensic accountants and, apparently, Evelyn Sterling. You can't prove. I don't have to. But keep pushing, and Oliver Grant might receive some interesting documents about Dalton Ventures' creative accounting. Your choice. The room held its breath. This wasn't the cool, controlled CEO they knew. This was someone who had decided that burning bridges provided better light than maintaining them. Wilfred Hart rose from his corner table, his movement drawing attention. I'd like to say something, if I may. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. I've been sitting here watching this young man handle your contempt with grace. But more importantly, I watched him handle a crisis with expertise none of you noticed because you were too busy photographing his uniform. I spent 30 years in military intelligence. I know tactical thinking when I see it. And what I see is someone who chose to become invisible in order to understand visibility. That's not stepping down, ladies and gentlemen. That's stepping back to see the whole board. He moved closer, his eyes finding Liam's. Carter Dynamics, you're the ghost who left the company after the Baltimore incident. 3 families detained because your algorithm couldn't distinguish between pattern and prejudice. The room froze. Carter Dynamics was legendary, in defense circles, a company that had revolutionized predictive security before its founder disappeared, leaving billions on the table rather than compromise on ethics. Liam met the older man's gaze steadily. Sir, you could have sold version 2.0 to the highest bidder. China offered what, 90 million? 97. And instead you're standing guard at restaurants, testing version 3 on yourself first, making sure it works without breaking people. Wilfred turned to address the room. This isn't some guard you're mocking. This is someone who walked away from more money than most of you will ever see because he couldn't stomach what it would cost other people. If that doesn't deserve respect, I don't know what does. The revelation shifted the room's energy entirely. Phones that had been recording for mockery now captured something else. A story of principle over profit, of choosing conscience over wealth. The guard wasn't a guard. He was tech royalty in disguise, a genius who had chosen ethics over earnings. Oliver Grant was already rewriting his next piece, the cynical angle abandoned for something rarer, truth that was stranger than fiction. His fingers flew across his phone screen, crafting a narrative about 2 people who had found each other, not despite their positions, but because of them, a CEO who saw through surface to substance, and a tech founder who chose humanity over algorithms. Amanda seized the moment with professional precision. Mr. Carter, would you be willing to discuss a potential partnership between Carter Dynamics and Sterling Enterprises? I believe our Smart City initiative could benefit from your expertise. If Miss Sterling is interested, I'm happy to explore possibilities, Liam replied. Though any partnership would need to include independent ethical oversight, non-negotiable. We wouldn't want it any other way, Evelyn said, her hand finding his. It wasn't a gesture for the cameras, but something quieter, more real to people, recognizing something in each other that transcended the evening's chaos. Henry Dalton, seeing the tide turn, attempted one last salvo. This is touching, really. The CEO and her reform tech genius. But let's not forget he just admitted to creating the system that wrongfully detained families. How does that fit with Sterling's corporate responsibility mandate? The same way your fund fits with SEC regulations, Liam replied evenly. Imperfectly, with room for improvement, and under constant scrutiny. He pulled out his basic phone, typing quickly. Though if we're discussing corporate responsibility, you might want to check your secure server. The one you think is air-gapped, but actually has a vulnerability in its cooling system's IoT sensors. You've been leaking client data for 6 months. Henry's face drained of color. That's impossible. We had the best. You had theatrical security. Looks impressive. Works minimally. Real protection requires understanding how systems fail, not just how they succeed. He pocketed his phone. I've already sent your IT team the patch, free of charge. Consider it a professional courtesy from one guardian to another. The room erupted in a chaos of conversation, speculation, and rapid reassessment. The narrative had shifted completely. From CEO slums with guard to power, couple emerges from unlikely meeting. Phones captured every angle, but now the story they told was one of 2 people who had seen through each other's camouflage to find something authentic underneath. Evelyn stood, pulling Liam with her. We're leaving. Together. She addressed the room with CEO authority. For those wondering about tomorrow's headlines, let me save you the suspense. Yes, I chose someone outside the usual circles. Yes, I'll continue to see him. And yes, Sterling Enterprises will be exploring a partnership with Carter Dynamics, with full ethical oversight and transparency. Any questions can be directed to our PR department, though I suspect Ms. Reyes has already drafted 17 different response strategies. 23. Amanda corrected with a smile that suggested she was enjoying this more than she should. As they moved toward the exit, the crowd parted not from deference to wealth or position, but from recognition of something rarer, 2 people who had found each other by refusing to be what others expected them to be. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streets that gleamed like black mirrors. They stood on the sidewalk, the restaurant's glow behind them, the city spreading out ahead. Neither seemed inclined to move. This is going to be complicated, Evelyn said. Everything worth doing island. The board will want extensive background checks, financial disclosures, probably a prenup that makes the tax code look simple. I've got nothing to hide. Well, nothing else to hide. She laughed, the first genuine laugh she had released in months. You realize we've known each other for exactly 3 hours? 3 hours and 17 minutes. But I knew what I needed to know in the first 17 seconds. Which was that you were looking for someone who could see you without the Sterling attached, just like I was testing whether anyone could see value in someone without visible power, He touched her hand gently. We both found what we weren't looking for. A year later, the Sterling Sentinel Alpha building would open to international acclaim, a structure that redefined urban security through understanding rather than surveillance. The bronze plaque in its lobby read, "Built for people, not for cameras," a mission statement that emerged from an unlikely dinner between a CEO who chose to see beyond uniforms and a security expert who chose to stand guard over principles rather than profits. Henry Dalton would face SEC investigation, his fund liquidated to pay back defrauded investors. Oliver Grant would win a Polk Award for his series on power, perception, and the myth of meritocracy, using that first night as his launching point. Wilfred Hart would join Carter Dynamics' Ethical Oversight Board, ensuring that version 4.0 would protect without prejudice. But that night, as Evelyn and Liam walked through empty streets, none of that future existed yet. There was only the present moment, two people who had spent their lives building walls learning to construct doors instead. The security guard who wasn't, and the CEO who was more than her title, finding in each other the answer to a question neither had known they were asking. Class, after all, wasn't about position or power. It was about choosing to act with integrity when no one believed you would. It was about seeing through performance to find purpose. It was about understanding that the greatest security came not from keeping others out but from knowing who to let in. The city hummed around them, its million lights reflecting off wet pavement, its endless appetite for stories momentarily satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new headlines,